In 1956, a package arrived at the White House addressed to President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And oh Lord, it sent the Secret Service into a tizzy. And it wasn't so much the size of the package, it wasn't much bigger than a shoebox. It was what was wrote on the outside of it. The return address was the 0 Hour Bomb Company. Well, you can imagine the panic. They thought somebody was mailing the president a bomb, so immediately they took it. They didn't have advanced bomb squads back then like they do now, you know, where they send a robot out and got dogs that sniff it and stuff like that. They just dunked it under the water. And nothing happened, of course, and so they mulled around about it for a while, and then finally somebody went and told the president, and the president come out and he saw his package, and it was all sopping wet, and he said, "Boys, what in the world have you done to my fishing reel?" And they said, "What, fishing reel?" And that's what it was. One of his buddies had sent him a fishing reel, and it was from the 0 Hour Bomb Company. Well, have you ever heard of the 0 Hour Bomb Company? It's a pretty good story, and I don't know if I can do it justice, but back in 1947, there's a fella out in Texas, and he was working on inventing a fishing reel that wouldn't backlash. And we've been talking about in this series bait casters and, you know, all the fun we have cast them and learn how not to backlash them. Well, a lot of people don't have patience for that, and you know, it was still an inconvenient thing when you got those backlashes, and so this guy wanted to come up with something that wouldn't backlash, and so he had been watching a store clerk winding and pulling twine out of a box, you know how they do, and he thought, well, that's pretty smart. They've got that box around the outside, keeps that line from tangling up when you pull it out. So he decided to do that, and he basically just took him a coffee can or a beer can or something like that, and put some fish, put a spool inside it, and pulled it out with some fishing line on it, and it worked. So he got tinkering around with it a little bit until he invented him a pretty good reel, and he'd go out and cast it, and he'd cast a mile and never would backlash. So he shopped it around to a few people and never could find anybody to buy it until he finally set on this 0 Hour Bomb Company. Well, the 0 Hour Bomb Company was a company, I believe it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they made bombs. Now, you might think that time of the century that they were doing it for World War II, but that wasn't it. They was doing it for fracking oil wells, early form of fracking, not like they frack nowadays. But they made bombs that you could put down in a hole, way down in a drill hole, and could detonate it by use of a timer. Well, it was after World War II, and they was, you know, having trouble selling. The technology had advanced, and they was having trouble selling their bombs, and this guy brought this reel he'd invented to them, and danged if they didn't like it. And he demonstrated it and cast all the way over top of their building, you know, with that reel. And so they decided that they'd go ahead and take it and kind of work on it a little bit. By 1947, 48, they had come up with a model of a reel that was just a fantastic reel, and they started trying to sell it. And they did. They sold it. It caught on pretty good. Not great, but pretty good, and people were buying it, especially out west and in the southeast. They were picking them up pretty good. Well, and what really got it going, though, was that incident I told you about to start with. Was back in 1956, whenever the president got one delivered. Of course, as you can imagine, that story got picked up in the newspapers, and everybody thought, well, if President Eisenhower wants a 0 Hour Bomb Company reel, then I want one too. And sales went crazy. But the 0 Hour Bomb Company decided they probably ought to change that name because they didn't want anybody else getting scared like the Secret Service did whenever his friend mailed it to the president. And so they just shortened it down to Zebco, and that's where the Zebco reels come from. And you know, Zebco has kind of evolved through the years, and they went through a period where they wasn't too good, but they're not too bad now, and the basic concept of the reels hasn't changed. They're called spin casters. Now, you know about a bait caster, and you know about a spinning reel. Well, this was a spinning reel that went on top of the rod, so spin caster. And that's why they called it that. Let me show you something. Let me get up out of my chair here. And I'm going to go over here and show you a couple. Here's an early model right here. Now this box is after they changed the name. But it is, if you look here, you see that it's before there was a zip code. So it's a pretty early model. Price was $19.50. Now, if you ran that price out to today's price, given inflation over the years, that'd be about $200. They weren't cheap reels when they first came out, but so they made some though that were affordable not too long after that, and you've probably seen them before. Here's another one. This is just a little bit later. I'm gonna say this one's late '60s, early '70s. And it cost $650, so you can see that that was a few years later and a whole lot cheaper. And that's a 202. So the 202 was kind of the entry level reel, and then they graduated up to a 404, and I've got one here somewhere. I'm gonna show it to you in a minute. And then they came out with this Zebco 33, and this Zebco 33, there's something about stainless steel reels. I told you about these Bantams. Something about a stainless steel reel that people really like, that fishermen really like. It's important that a reel look good to a fisherman. It's important to me. I want my fishing equipment to look good. And so they came out with this 33, and it was a little bit better model, a little bit higher dollar materials, metal gears inside. The handle was made a little bit better, and it had a clicker on it so that whenever a fish bit, and pulled line, then it would click. So they were thinking, if you cast bait out or something, so let it sit there on a riverbank, that you might want to hear it instead of just see it. So that 33 was really popular, and so my story with the Zebco 33 takes me back to about 1970. Let's see, I was in the 7th grade, so I'm gonna say that was 1973, and my mom was real sick. My mom died of cancer when I was 13, but I was about teeming, and she was in and out of the hospital a lot. And so my brother and I, we would sometimes go over and stay with this family over in Claiborne County, Tennessee, named the Louthan family. And the Louthans were a big family. They had 4 boys and 3 girls, I believe, 2 girls. And they lived back in the holler, awfulest, deepest holler you ever seen. I mean, it was back in there, right beside a creek. You had to go across a foot log to get to the house. There was no running water. The house was built, situated real close to a spring. So you could carry water in the house, and there wasn't an indoor toilet at all. And I spent a lot of time with the Louthans, and got to be really tight with them, and still, know them and keep up with them to this day. But whenever first time I went over there, my dad introduced them to me. We walked up on the front porch, and I saw 2 reels, and one of them was a 202, and the other one was a 33. And the 202 belonged to Ben. He was the youngest son, and the 33 belonged to Mark. He was a little bit older. And Mark went on to become a doctor, a real famous doctor out in Los Angeles, and he eventually went back and built them a new house, and it overlooks the valley where the other house was. Just a beautiful place over there. Of course, the mom and dad have passed on now, and some of the boys have. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked just like I always do. And this video is going to be a little longer. I'm going to give myself a little longer on this one because it's a good story. So anyway, we'd have to get up and milk a cow. They only had one cow, and we called her Jers. That was a good name for a Jersey cow, wasn't it? And so we'd get up, but we'd have to get up before school in the morning and milk a cow. And it wasn't just like going outside and milking the cow. The cow lived all the way, the barn was all the way up in another holler. And you had to walk along the creek to get up there to it, and then go up the hill. And so we'd get up a little earlier and we'd take that Zebco 33 and a 202 with us, and we'd always kept some red worms inside the house beside the stove where they wouldn't get too cold. We didn't have no heat upstairs at all. And so there was a school of horny heads under the foot log, and then there was another school on up a little bit where the trail came down real tight to the creek. And we'd catch horny heads and we'd bring them back when we brought the milk back. And Miss Louthan, Ruth Louthan, she would clean them and cook them for us. And we'd have horny head fish for breakfast sometimes. And that was a real treat. And she'd make, some biscuits to go with it, and eggs and everything else that goes good with a fish breakfast. And one of the best things you ever had. And I'll never forget that. Now, I had used fishing reels before that, but I never seen a spin caster reel. My dad had those bait casters, and I saw bait casters, and I'd seen a few spinning reels at that time. I'd never seen a spin caster. Man, I really liked them. And to this day, I still like them, and I still use them for kids. Now, Zebco is famous for something else, and they're the first company that came out and made combinations, a rod and a reel, where you could buy a rod and reel together, And here's one. I told you I'd show you some of my collection. Here's one I found. There might be a few bugs in that. That's a 33 and a 404. And so they packaged those two together. I found that one up at Pasadena Sportfish Fishing Show a couple of years ago, and I didn't pay much for it at all. And it's pretty valuable, all put together like that, never been used. But they made those combinations, and of course they caught on, especially for kids. And so when my grandkids first started coming up here to the Chesapeake Bay and going fishing with me on my boat, you know what reels I gave them? I gave them those Zebcos, and I suggest you do too, because they teach you good mechanics of fishing. They teach you how to release your line. They'll help you learn how to the mechanics of casting a bait caster. So don't be afraid to give those kids a Zebco. A lot of people think of them as cheap reels, and they're not really expensive, but that's even better because they're entry level. And trust me, one of them kids is going to drop a rod and reel off the side of the boat, and you much rather drop a 1995 outfit off than a $219.95 outfit off. So that's the way I go. But anyway, here's my. That's my grandson and my granddaughter's first two reels. And those are both Zebco outfits. And you can see there, I hope you can see that it's still got a lure on that one. He landed 28-inch rockfish with that, Tucker did. And then Ella, she got the little bigger one. The 404 is just a little bigger than the 202. And it holds just a little bit more line. And one day, Ella hooked into a cow-nose ray with that 404. We was in Eastern Bay, not too far from St. Michael's, and oh my goodness, you should have seen her fighting that fish. And she fought it for a while, and she handed it off to Tucker, and he fought it for a while, and then he handed it back to her, and they eventually got it up to the boat. And somewhere I got a picture of it. But don't underestimate those Zebco reels, because they ain't nothing wrong with them. They're good, and they'll teach you kids how to fish. And so that's my story of my 404s and 202s and 33s, my Zebcos. And we'll tell some more stories in the next episode, and I hope you'll tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because that's a good way to let YouTube know that you're paying attention, and that way you won't miss anything when it first comes out. And I appreciate you watching and sharing my videos. I can see you're watching. Don't forget to send me some questions, because I like to hear your questions, and I'll answer them via the video, or maybe I'll just answer them in the comments section or something. But I'll try to answer every question you send me, if you want to send them. So hope y'all have a good day, and I'll see you out there on the water.